Hey folks, Matt Easton here, Scholar Gladiatore. So many of my comrades and friends are currently at the Battle of Waterloo battlefield doing the Waterloo Uncovered project, which if you haven't heard of it, look in my previous videos, just search for Waterloo, as in the Battle of Waterloo, and you'll find the previous videos I did there last year. Sadly, I couldn't make it there this year. Maybe I'll be able to before they finish up. I don't know yet. I might just hop in my car and drive over to Belgium, as you do. But I don't know if I'll be able to. But essentially, because I was on holiday at the time when it started, which is great sadness to me because it's a great project and I love to support it in any way that I can. So making you aware of it on this channel is one of those ways, and there's a link below to their website. But by coincidence, I was in the bookshop with my daughter a few days ago because she won some book tokens at school, so I took her to buy some books, and inevitably I came away with a book as well, which was this book I hadn't heard of before, which is called Waterloo Voices 1815. The Battle at First Hand, and it's by Martin Beardsley. Okay, and I should caveat this with I haven't read this book yet, but I've been thumbing through it. I thumbed through it in the shop in Waterstones, and I saw that it was my kind of thing. Obviously, the Battle of Waterloo itself is very interesting. As most of you watching this channel will know, my main interest in the 19th century actually lies a bit later in the 19th century, mostly kind of colonial warfare, but Waterloo and the Napoleonic period nevertheless does interest me, and the Waterloo is a fascinating battle. And one of the reasons that Waterloo is so kind of great from a historian's point of view is there's a huge amount of written documentation. There's a lot of history to study from the Battle of Waterloo, unlike other battles of the period, you know, Salamanca or whatever, Austerlitz or this kind of. There's quite a bit written about Austerlitz actually, but in the English language, there is a particularly large amount written about the Battle of Waterloo because it was so momentous. I mean, really, it was probably the most significant battle in European history until we get to the First World War. Maybe you could argue some of the, maybe like the Franco-Prussian War was up there equal, but Waterloo was really huge, not only in terms of the number of people, the number of combatants involved, but also in terms of the ramifications for European history. It really kind of echoed through the ages and still does, you could say. But anyway, I was thumbing through it and I thought, well, let's pull out the section and talk about it. I know some of you like these sort of extracts from history. I like them myself. So let's just delve into one. I was thumbing through and I thought, let's pick one to do with cavalry. I've spoken about French Cuirassiers in the past. They are the French heavy cavalry that wear cuirasses. A cuirasse in French is armour, is a breastplate. And they also wore helmets, and they used a type of sword. Again, if you search in my videos, you can find previous videos talking about the Cuirassier's sword, which I have an example of. So the text is by John Booth, who is the editor of a work called The Battle of Waterloo. And he writes, and I'll stop at bits through this and sort of comment on things. So he writes, the cuirassiers of the French Imperial Guard are all arrayed in armour. The front cuirass or cuirasse is in the form of a pigeon's breast, so as to effectually turn off a musket shot, unless fired very near, owing to its brightness. Well, let's just stop there for a second. Owing to its brightness, I'm not really sure what he means there. That means polish, but it's actually owing to the material strength and the shape, deflective shape of the breastplate. Now, I believe that I noted in previous videos that cuirasses or cuirasses weren't necessarily effective at turning aside musket shots. Now, I have since been corrected on that. So my impression was that these breastplates were effective against pistols and shrapnel, but not muskets. Well, it turns out I was wrong. Apparently, they were musket proof beyond a certain range. So as he says unless fired very near. What do we mean by very near? Probably like 20-30 yards or meters. But beyond that, so probably when the first volley of musket fire goes out at about, let's say about 80 to 100 yards or meters, At that range, it seems like these breastplates were actually pretty effective at deflecting musket balls. Now, you could say, well, they're still uncovered in their arms and their legs and their faces. Yes, but if you imagine your upper torso, remember the lower part of your torso, you've got a horse's head in front of your groin. So your upper torso is somewhat exposed and you've got a helmet on your head. The helmet's probably not bulletproof, incidentally, but if the breastplate is, that covers a fair part of your body. And if you were shot in the arm or the leg, then you could potentially still be an effective rider. You could still be an effective combatant in that engagement. And in fact, I know of an example from the charge of the Light Brigade of someone who was shot twice on the way in and still attacked and maybe killed some of the Russian gunners during the Battle of Balaclava, despite the fact they'd been shot twice, one in each thigh. So being shot in the limb, unless you were very unlucky, it hit an artery or shattered a bone completely or something like this, it could potentially just be a flesh wound and you could still fight. You'd almost certainly be invalided after the action, but you could still be useful in the action. And horses as well, we should also mention horses, according to the 19th century sources, could actually take several shots sometimes. Sometimes, if they were unlucky, they'd get shot once and fall down dead. But there are accounts of horses being shot several times and still being effective as cavalry mounts. Okay, so don't just think because a horse is shot, that's it, gone. This isn't Mountain Blade Napoleonic Wars, where one bayonet stab mystically kills a horse. But a bayonet stab or a shot absolutely might not put a large horse out of action. So let's carry on. He says the back cuirass is made to fit the back, which is true. It's shaped more like the back, whereas the front is more domed. The back is more shaped to the shoulder blades. And they weigh from 9 to 11 pounds each. Yep, that's, as far as I know, that's true. It's about the weight of a musket or a rifle. So they're pretty heavy things, but when they're strapped securely to your body, you don't really feel it very much. According to the size of the man, and are stuffed inside with a pad. I'm not sure that I knew that. I've actually seen quite a number of these antique cuirasses, but I'm not sure that I've noticed that they ever had pads inside. But with antique ones, I guess maybe the pad just rots away or gets taken away or whatever because they get hung on a wall. They fit on by a kind of fish scale clasp and are put off and on in an instant. What he means is, so if you Google a picture of these breastplates, you'll see there's a kind of strap coming over each shoulder with overlapping lames on it so that the strap can't be cut by a sword cut. And they link onto, they've kind of got a hole that goes over a peg on the breastplate, and they're actually very quick and easy to put on, as he says. They have helmets the same as our horse guards, which means a certain type of plumed helmet, and straight long swords and pistols, but not carbines. All the accounts agree in the great advantage that the French cuirassiers derive from their armour. Very true, all the accounts I've read say the same thing. Their swords were 3 inches longer than any used by the Allies. I'm not sure that's completely true. So the French cuirassier sword is 37-inch blade. I think it's generally true that most other heavy cavalry had blades of about 34, 35 inches. I'm not sure that literally no other allies had cuirasses. I suspect that some of the Prussian and maybe Dutch, maybe Belgian, who were part of the Allies, of course, at the time, cuirassiers themselves, because they had cuirassiers. You could find cuirassiers from Austria or Denmark or Belgium. I think some of them had equally long swords, but anyway. And in close action, the cuts of our sabres did no execution, except if they fortunately came across the neck of the enemy. That's not totally true. So we know from other accounts that people equipped with shorter cutting swords, particularly the light cavalry with the 1796 light cavalry sabre, specifically aimed at the limbs, particularly the arms and faces of the cuirassiers deliberately. So if you could, basically cuirassiers were predominantly thrust. If you could cross their thrust and then come in with a riposte, you could hit them across the face. And we also know accounts of them deliberately knocking the helmets backwards to get more at the face. The latter also feeling themselves secure in their armour, so the cuirassiers feeling safe in their armour, advanced deliberately and steadily until they came within about 20 yards of our ranks. That's incredibly close when you think about relatively modern warfare with gunpowder weapons. If you think about it, 20 yards, I mean, you can run across 20 yards on foot pretty quickly. You can throw a spear 20 yards. So you can probably throw a knife 20 yards, and it's incredibly close range for all types of firearm, even pistols. Okay, even pistols you can shoot pretty accurately. Even a smoothbore pistol you can shoot pretty accurately at 20 yards. As a musket ball could not penetrate the cuirass at greater distance. Now that's a really interesting data point. So his belief, whether it's right or wrong, was that the French Cuirassiers breastplates couldn't be penetrated by a musket ball beyond 20 yards away. That's quite incredible if they've essentially got bulletproof breastplates. But it comes at a cost, as he explains. The cuirass, however, was attended with one disadvantage. The wearer in close action cannot use his arm with perfect facility, or ease, in all directions. He chiefly thrusts, but cannot cut with ease. Now this is corroborated by other sources I've read that say exactly the same thing. So one of the things about these breastplates is, unlike earlier medieval and Renaissance breastplates, which are actually cut quite far into the chest here to allow the arms to move across here quite easily, the 19th century Cuirassiers breastplates are cut quite far out on the chest. So actually you can't bring your arm across here. So if you were to cut like this, you'd find your arm would jam on the edge of your breastplate there, and you couldn't do a backswing because you can't really bring the arm across. So in that situation, absolutely, thrusting, not only is the sword really a thrusting sword, it's not a very good cutting sword. So the breastplate kind of, in addition to the design of the sword, kind of prevents them from cutting effectively and encourages them to thrust. Whether that was deliberate or accidental, I don't know, but it's the end result. They're all chosen men, must be above 6 feet high, and have served in 3 campaigns, 12 years in the service, and of good character. So those are some major requirements. And obviously the French Cuirassiers were an elite. They were an elite of an elite. Okay, so they were in the heavy cavalry and they were Cuirassiers. But 6 feet high is quite remarkable in circa 1800. There weren't a huge number of men, soldiers, who would have been above 6 feet high. As we know, the average height in Europe reached just about its lowest point in the Industrial Revolution of the 18th century. So 6 feet high was relatively unusual, and in addition to that, to physically be 6 feet high and have served in 3 campaigns and have had 12 years in the service. Now, I don't know whether that's all correct. That's what he believed. I haven't independently corroborated that information, but that would be quite a demanding set of criteria for your cuirassiers. And you can imagine these select men, you can imagine why you want to stick them in breastplates to make them bulletproof. And he says, and if there is a good horse to be found, they have them. So they also got the preference. So all of the best horses in the French army, large horses anyway, would have been given to the cuirassiers. And he finally says, and it is to be observed that a wound through a cuirass mostly proves mortal. Now, I'm not entirely sure what he means there, but I guess what he's saying is that if a blow goes through a cuirass, then it's going to kill the person inside because of the energy that's delivered at the target. It would have had to have been a close shot. I think that's what he means. There is another possibility, and there is another possibility that if you penetrate a cuirass with a musket ball at close range, it's not only going to carry the ball into the wound, but it's maybe going to carry some of the breastplate into the wound as well, shrapnel, essentially. We know, incidentally, that musket balls that didn't kill instantly often were fatal later on because they carried clothing, dirty clothing, uniform, shirts and jackets into the wound. And sometimes the musket ball was pulled out, but there were still bits of clothing left in there, and that festered and turned septic, and the person died of blood poisoning, essentially, within days. So there we go. I hope that was I recommend this Waterloo Voices 1815. I think it's a new book, yeah, highly recommended. What I've read of it so far, what I've thumbed through so far, looks super interesting. And once again, give a little look and like to the Waterloo Uncovered team, and have a look at their Facebook page where they've got updates, because they're actually digging at the moment. And that literally means that while you're watching this video, the Waterloo Uncovered team are actually pulling archaeology out of the ground on the Battle of Waterloo site, and uncovering new bits of history, as it were. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon for the next video. Cheers, folks.